Megan Jancy. My name is Michael Foster with MTFA Architecture, and we're very glad to be here on what we think is a very exciting and interesting project. Our goal today is to share an update of where we are in the design and to address really the vision and mission, look at the process and program, site analysis and design update that will help us to really understand the project and the goals that have been set forth. You know, as was established, this vision to strengthen our community efforts to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring for residents of Harrisonburg and Rockingham County. And this is not just a vision, it needs to be a strategy through design and service, with that mission to serve as a centralized hub, an area for service providers to provide shelter, compassionate support, and access to services for people who are experiencing homelessness or are at risk of homelessness. That is a strategy that we've tried to incorporate into everything that we've done. The values as a safe, affordable place to live and to operate, diversity of the community, excellence and commitment to creative solutions, an inclusive process, which has been, and education and advocacy to achieve that vision and what makes that possible, as well as the stewardship of land and resources to better serve our community. The goal, which we are committed to, is the delivery of a permanent, low-barrier shelter for adults experiencing homelessness. You know, when we looked at this, we wanted to really understand homelessness and our experience. If you meet 100 homeless people, you meet 100 different humans that are homeless for different reasons. But one common theme is that the experience of both homelessness and what causes it is a traumatic effect. So we have incorporated trauma-informed design and guidelines, everything from space, orientation, color. These are things that don't cost extra, but they're a thoughtfulness to address the goals we just mentioned. And these involve principles of empowerment, to connection, a sense of security, privacy, the acoustics, the wellness, and it's achieved through orientation, security, color, natural light. But the most important theme of that is the dignity for everybody involved. And dignity does not add to the cost or the schedule, but it does add to the approach to how it's addressed. So what I'd like Megan to do as a principal and the project manager for this project is talk about the schedule and walk through the design process and approach. And unfortunately, I'll be the one interrupting from time to time to add my 2 cents and to help facilitate some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So as this process is rolling along, as Aaron mentioned, this is our second meeting here with you in the community. And just to give you an understanding of timeline and being able to deliver the opening of the shelter for November of 2023. And this is a really critical deadline. So really understanding that there's many factors that go into designing the building, one of them being our schedule, there's always cost, and then our overall goals and objectives. And together, that's where we are able to find success. There were several programming objectives that were incorporated as part of the requirements for the project. The primary being able to provide 100 beds during hypothermia season, so 75 permanent beds, 25 overflow. Really understanding the importance of how do we accommodate that as the need here at the shelter facilities. Understanding all of the support services that go with that, including the dining facilities, the kitchen, the bathrooms and access, cool down spaces, professional offices, opportunities for growth, maybe what is operating here today and the immediate need making sure we've planned in and left room for the future. So understanding that that program can change over time as well. So we've been here, we've looked at your building. As everyone is aware, this is an existing house on the site. It has an addition or two that's been put on over time, understanding what is the highest and best use for the site in a way in which we can do this. We've taken a look at the property and really gotten to become very intimate with understanding that existing building. The area that is highlighted in yellow is being proposed as being removed from the project building today. It was one of the additions out the back to make room for the connection for the new shelter space. When we look at the site, understanding how do people arrive at the site, and there's many different people arriving at the site. So from the potential user client experience, staff experience, volunteers, deliveries, maintenance, how does all of this happen? Understanding where are those spaces within the building, how do you make a transition to greet someone into a facility, where is the facility itself, and how do we incorporate use of the land around the building. So understanding administrative and support space, how does that operate, where is their security, where is their entry and parking, how do people make a transition for a secure check-in and having that normal, that process of being able to then enter the shelter, and then the privacy and dignity of the shelter space itself. Looking at your site, understanding through this process and listening, understanding the need for parking both for the staff, the community and volunteers, but also some of the clients using the space have cars. So creating separated parking that allows for that to occur. That smaller parking lot near the entry of the shelter itself allows also for potential medical services vans, other opportunities for fire, emergency, things like that to really allow for that to happen, and then still have parking for staff and volunteers that's also in proximity to then the staff entrance to the facility. As part of this, really trying to understand in the plans, we've tried to color this so it's a little bit easier to follow, and I'll kind of walk you through that. But really understanding the area in orange. That's the primary entry space, the multi-purpose room, and the function of daily check-in. Clean room responsibilities, making sure that there is operations that can be handled upon entry. But one of the spaces that isn't colored is that exterior entry plaza, the opportunity space where people can transition to come into the shelter. And it has a representation, which you'll see from the exterior, the idea of how do you welcome someone into the facility, how do you make it a low barrier. So you'll see that in just a few minutes as well. Understanding the support spaces that go with that. So reusing the existing historic building for office space and staff administrative functions. The area on the lower left, really understanding that there isn't full medical services on site, but there is a need for triage and first aid. So knowing that there's an opportunity or a place where someone can be handling that, that's not a part of or a disruption to the rest of the shelter space, while there's possibly a waiting for medical services. So being able to create that as a space that's removed from the rest of the shelter space is important. And then the area on the first floor here, marked in red on the upper left, is about a third of the sleeping beds. And there's a combination of spaces. There's low partition walls that allow for some privacy and security, creating groupings of beds in the larger congregate area. But then also respite spaces if there is some isolation required, or if someone has a need for some privacy, there are some of those spaces built in as well. On the second floor, you'll see a lot more of the sleeping areas, both shown in red, but they're all the same size, so it's being able to divide and create smaller scale congregate living with this ability to also create some of those other private spaces. In the center are universal beds, so that if there is a transgender or someone with a service animal, someone who needs a special isolation, that can also be provided, that has not been labeled as men or women. Access to bathrooms and showers. There's access from within the sleeping areas, and then the 4 universal beds also have access to a universal bathroom. The area here in orange is the lounge space. Sometimes the multi-purpose room could be loud or busy. Some people need some separation. This is an alternate location of community space where there's more of a, small tables, movable furniture, really understanding the need for sometimes something slightly quieter. And then on the second floor of the house, some additional office space and workspace. So there's a lot of opportunities there in order to create the services needed to support the shelter. And here are some examples: congregate living spaces, low partitions. Of the example on the upper right is in New York City, understanding the need for natural daylight. How do you create sense of privacy and security, but allow for that natural light to filter through the whole space? And then on the left, the idea of a multi-purpose room, its connection to nature. The one on the left, on the lower left, has no daylight, so they brought the plants inside. At this, in our shelter design, looking to create that connection to the outdoors through a covered back porch with access to the landscape and outdoor space that has privacy and is not the front door. So going back to the idea of trauma-informed design, what does that and how does that show up here at the shelter? And this is an example of how we can take a picture from Harrisonburg and use that to create a color palette and a connection to its local context. So using that natural color palette of the stones and the green and the nature, how does that show up in the building? How does the architecture reflect those values? And the vision of a front porch that welcomes you as you arrive. Staff having its own secure entrance, still being able to recognize and separate the new from the old and not trying to replicate the structure of the existing historic house, but being connected to it and one idea on the campus. And then to be able to provide that connection to that landscape in the outside, the covered porch that can be used through different times of day. This space can also be accessed at night. That's not the front door. That's not a place where other people may be active, to be able to have that in and out. And so having a valuable place for that to occur. As you can see, the entry and that welcoming front porch, the need for a covered space. Someone may not be ready to transition inside. How do you provide that comfort? How do you provide that sense of security? Harrisonburg has lots of color, not just one particular view, but if you take a look through the different times of day, through the different times of seasons, you can do this with another set of palette colors, and recognizing that this is not just one answer, but there are many answers to color, and how does that feel connected to its landscape. So an alternate vision of understanding that the blue rock and the stone of the community, how does it create a residential scale or become at that residential scale, understanding the need to be able to show that and demonstrate that another color palette is just as successful. So really understanding how can we connect to the Harrisonburg area through the architecture. Understanding the need for energy efficiency and balancing cost, planning for future, understanding while we may not be able to slow the project down to get everything in now, planning it so that we can hit November and allow for the opportunity for future growth and to be able to accommodate the opportunities to do things such as adding solar panels or other ways of creating a better and more efficient energy envelope. So here you can see, I really just want to show you the views, the same views that you've already seen, but really understanding that, again, the separation of the old and the new and the connection to the landscape can be achieved in multiple ways. And again, that back porch and that space, that cool down space, and the opportunity to create a community using the architecture to do so. And again, that front porch, that entry, understanding standing outside, being protected from the rain, and making that transition to the inside. The idea of stewardship of the land, that this is just a piece of the puzzle. There is not a one solution to ending homelessness, but understanding how does that become informed through our planning and future planning. Allowing the opportunity for the site to expand, provide more supportive housing services through future housing, potentially on site, allowing for open space and growth, things to change over time, not just our building, but the site itself, in order to be able to provide more than just this immediate need. So our next steps and what are we going to take away from this? Obviously, interested in hearing what you have to say. We'll take that into consideration and understanding and how this can be wrapped into our project as we continue to work through our design drawings. We're hoping to have drawings out for construction bid by April. So we are working furiously trying to get to building permit drawings. And so this is a really important time to hear input and understand how we can continue to make this project successful. And then also to put out there the next update to stakeholders looking in that same time frame, late March, early April, to give you another update as we're heading into construction.